Okay, so hey guys, and welcome back to another Axel 72 video. And in today's video, I'm going to be giving my reaction to Ricardo Sandoval beating Kenshiro Teraji via split decision. And so, if you are new around here and you haven't yet subscribed, please do so. Like the video if you do indeed like the video, and feel free to join the Patreon as well. There's been lots of really good support on there, and I really appreciate anybody who's even consider joining. The link will be in the description. It does really support the channel. And again, you can request any sort of combat related content and I will try my best to do it. So thank you very much. And so yeah, let's get straight into this video. A bit of a it was a bit of a crazy event, to be honest. I think the actual show did live up to the hype and to the expectation from the fans. And I'm going to go through each of the world title fights. And of course, we'll start off with the main event. So now Ricardo Sandoval is a unified world flyweight champion, of course, picking up the WBA and WBC titles. And it was a pretty good back and forth type fight. I mean, for the most part, especially late on, it started really turning into a bit of a slugfest. And I mean, for each fight, whilst I was watching the fight, I was making some little notes, and so I'm going to be going through them. I hope it all kind of fumbles into making some sort of sense, my little notes. But I mean, just before the fight, something I wanted to touch upon pre-fight with Sandoval was that he kind of had a lonely environment in his changing room. There was kind of a clip in which we saw Sandoval in his changing room, and then we saw Teraji in his, and Teraji had a massive entourage of people. He was surrounded by people, and then Sandoval was in the room, and it was just him and one or two other people. It was really quite a quiet place, and I think that is something which you can definitely help you get in the moment, get in the zone, and things like that. I mean, there's been so much discussion from the past couple of weeks of everything that happened with Daniel Dubois when he was in his changing room and trying to get the big entourage into Wembley Stadium and stuff. And it just didn't seem like that with Sandoval. Of course, he was coming to the Lions Den in Japan, and he was just kind of locked in, fully focused. You could tell from the pretty much the get go, and it meant that he came in seemingly with quite a confident start, and he definitely was able to have success quite early on. And I mean, Sandoval started off good. He wasn't, jabbing a tremendous amount. That wasn't really what I was expecting from him. He kind of grew into that a little bit more, but something that he was doing early on was feinting his hooks, which was quite an interesting thing, in which not many fighters are able to do. And again, that was helping him find his way in and have success a bit. I mean, Taraji's jab early was what had the most amount of success, in my opinion. But that was, the first 2, 3 rounds, and then Sandoval started to look confident, and I had Sandoval winning round 3. And Sandoval, throughout the fight, was definitely landing the more varied punches and the more varied, powerful work, in which, was very interesting and nice to see. It showcased his attacking ability and prowess and the ability to be able to, switch it up when possible and add in different aspects to his game. He then, of course, suddenly, after, having quite a lot of success and, catching Taraji with some quite big shots, Taraji dropped him out of nowhere with a straight right in round 5, and that was a big moment in the fight. I mean, it was a right on the button shot straight through Sandoval's guard, a very precise, pinpoint accurate shot, in which, again, you could see caused a shock and a surprise to Sandoval, but it wasn't a shot in which, really damaged to Sandoval. It wasn't a shot in which he looked rocked from or particularly hurt from. I mean, Taraji's jab, like I say, was looking great and he was setting everything off it. And again, that was a really good shot, but Sandoval was definitely not out of it at that point and made the rounds really hard to score throughout because, Taraji was catching a lot of shots or at times getting more power shots through in exchanges, after the knockdown, post knockdown, maybe into the between 7th to say 10th round, he was probably landing the more powerful shots just because Taraji was catching a lot of Sandoval's work. But then at the end, it was a bit of a slugfest where it was difficult to score. I think the 12th round was quite tough to score. The 11th round I had for Taraji, and inevitably, like I say, I think it was a very close fight, and so that's why I was particularly surprised to see that the scorecards went into Sandoval's favour. I mean, there probably will be a rematch made. I mean, obviously, Teraji is, or, at that time was a pound for pound, I think, number 9 in the Ring Magazine rankings, and so, he probably will be zipped out of it as a result of his performance here. But, I mean, I was hearing some, and I was kind of thinking that, you know, Taraji was going to be able to win this fight, but he would struggle with Sandoval's ability and the kind of youthfulness, energy that he was going to bring, and the Mexican type of mindset that he does have. But I thought, Taraji always is able to find a way, no matter who he's against, and is always able to have success. But I think at this weight, he does struggle a bit, and perhaps he is not slowing down, but his weaknesses are getting showcased a bit more. I mean, his minimal head movement and weak guard is really getting exposed from these fighters, especially like a Sandoval, who was able to have so much success finding the openings on Taraji. And, Taraji can't just be standing toe to toe with fighters in the final round when it is such a close fight, and always be able to expect to be able to knock him out in the last couple rounds, or to be able to win it via a close decision or something like that. And so, now they probably will run a rematch. Perhaps it might be in America, I'm not entirely sure, but this was a very big win for Sandoval. Of course, it was a shock win. Again, being able to get the scorecards go his way on Japanese soil was very impressive. All props to him going to Japan and facing the big guy, and the guy who has all the fans, the big name and everything like that. Again, like I say, just absolute credit to him, and it showcases that these Japanese fighters aren't untouchable, aren't undefeatable, and yeah, now we'll have to wait and see what happens if he does get an instant rematch ordered, or if they go down a different type of route. And it definitely could have been easy for Sandoval to bow out of that fight after he got a knockdown. Mentally, I'm sure that would have scrambled him up quite a lot, because of he was having so much success. But I mean, I don't know what his corner was saying, but I'd imagine that they would, rally behind him, remind him that he was still having so much success, and brought him that confidence back. But again, he still had to go out there and do all the work, and so all credit to him. A great performance from himself, and it just was crazy to see Kenshiro Teraji defeat. Going on now to speak about the co-main event, which was another pretty brutal type war to an extent. I mean, maybe not a tremendously big war, but it was still a good fight, which was a back and forth type fight, and that was the Antonio Vargas versus Daigo Higa draw for the WBA World Bantamweight Champion. And before I speak about the actual fight, something I didn't realise was that Tsutsumi was made champion in recess due to his injury. I thought that he'd been forced to vacate. No, like I say, he's been made champion in recess, which I'm not really a massive fan of. I'd rather them kind of move on a little bit. But, still, that was why Tsutsumi was in the ring afterwards with his belt around him, trying to make a fight, which I'll touch upon in a minute, because that is, a little bit dismissive of Daigo Higa as a fighter. But, the fight was a bit of a slower start than I feel like most expected. I think the first few rounds definitely were quite reserved from both fighters, actually, and Vargas started off very much so with a very tight guard, and was giving Higa a lot of respect. And that, them first few rounds, it looked like a bit of a chess match, and you know it seemed like it was a bit of a jab off, and I hadn't really seen Higa fight like this before. I mean, obviously Vargas would have been coming into this fight a bit more conservative because of what had happened in previous fights with him getting dropped early on, and again, it seemed like it was that trying to be very careful with what he was throwing, being very defensively smart and disciplined and things like that. But of course, the one moment in Vargas kind of dropped his hands to an extent. Higa was in there, dropped him in the fourth. That was a bit more of a a big knockdown. So Vargas, again did very well to come back from that, and it was a shot in which was, Higa coming up into a shot with a good strong left hand, which he twisted really well into, and again, that was a very big knockdown, and basically, like I say, the one moment in which Vargas at that point up to the fight and up to that fourth round had actually shown any kind of defensive weakness in his guard, and again, he got punished for that early on. I think his chin is quite poor and is going to be something that he's going to have to, get through and recover from quite a lot of his performances. But at the same time, Higa is one of the bigger punchers in the division, respectively, and again, perhaps he might have more success against less powerful punchers, but still, at this point already in his career, Vargas, he's able to recover, and he showcased he's able to recover. Of course, he doesn't want to be going and having to get scored a knockdown to be able to recover well and, regain confidence, but it seems like he is able to regain confidence well after getting knocked down, and that was when the fight began to, shift a bit more in Vargas's favour, and his jab was looking good, and he definitely showcased that he was the technically better fighter. Higa himself was actually boxing quite smartly for the most part. I mean, he wasn't as wild as what I've seen him, and he was catching shots, quite well from Vargas himself. He was kind of spamming the uppercuts at one point, which did look a bit interesting because it didn't look like there was a tremendous amount of power behind them, but they were both having good amounts of success in the fight. I think there was rounds in which were difficult to score, and there was back and forths and things like that. I think Vargas was beginning to be the busier into the later rounds and was kind of running that risk of getting caught, and he did seemingly get caught with a relatively big shot in the 10th, Vargas, but survived to then get into a bit of a war to finish off, and like I say, that was a good ending of the fight, and two fights in which ended good there in the co-main and the main for the fans in the entertainment aspect. And again, like I say, some of the rounds were close, and then in that final round, it was quite a crazy final round with Higa suddenly getting knocked down out of nowhere, realistically. And I mean, he would have won that fight if he'd not been knocked down. And it is a shame for Higa because he's been in a position in now 3 occasions in which he's been so close to just claiming that singular title. Well, no, I think the Takai fight was for another belt, but still just claiming a world title. He's been so close on 3 occasions against Takai, against Tsutsumi, now against Vargas. 2 of them have been draws. One of them was a fight in which I felt like he actually deserved more so than the actual draws, but again, like I say, he got knocked down with a bit of a ghost punch to an extent. It was a punch in which the cameras didn't pick up too well and caught him when he was coming in. It was a nicely timed shot, and I'm glad that it was scored and knocked down instead of a trip or a push or a slip in which the ref easily could have mistaken it for. But again, he didn't win, and I don't feel like you can ever bet on Higa, to be honest. I mean, Vargas did, in my opinion, and in the opinion of everybody, I mean, he came into the fight on the bookies underdog. He did way better than everybody expected, and the last minute knockdown, of course, did him the job, and he deserved to get the draw at least. But, if you look at it, you could definitely make the argument in which Vargas, I feel like in draws, there's very few draws that are, in my respect, very much a draw. I think they can always lean kind of a bit more in one direction than the other, and including the knockdown, you do have to lean, in my opinion, a bit more towards Vargas in that fight. But again, will they do a rematch? You have to wait and see. It's going to be very interesting to see what they do next with this belt, because of course Tsutsumi is champion in recess. He came into the ring, which means that they might try and skip over the Higa fight, which would be a bit of a shame because Higa, of course, does deserve to get another chance at a world title fight. But I don't know if they're just going to be fed up of giving him opportunities now because he just doesn't seem to be able to win. So will they just skip over him and just do a Tsutsumi versus Vargas fight and then eventually fight Higa again? I'm not entirely sure. I feel like no matter what, Higa should just not fight until it's for another world title. And I mean, they're talking about a possible card in December that was mentioned, so perhaps maybe let Vargas Tsutsumi fight, because Tsutsumi, you can tell that he's wanting to get back into the ring and fight again, because he hasn't fought, of course, since the Higa fight, and you could tell watching that fight he was eager to get back in there. So maybe Tsutsumi Vargas December, then the winner of that go on to fight Higa again. But I just don't feel like you can, not remember Higa. You always have to, make sure that Higa's getting that shot again, because he does really deserve it. So again, probably that will be, what will happen in what I think will happen. And then, I mean, something that else was just a bit interesting was, Vargas is a young champion. He hasn't been given that time as a champion to be able to, be with the fans and take the photos and stuff. But he was kind of walking around the ring, posing like he won in front of the cameras and things like that, which, I understand it's the first time being able to have the belt around him properly, but he didn't win, so it's a weird one. I felt like he just went straight away and walked out, and then Vargas started doing interviews like he'd won, and it was just a bit of a weird dynamic. But to speak about the other fight, with the other world title fight that was on this card, which I got my prediction right for. I mean, I said that Takami would win. I think I said a unanimous decision, but it was a TKO in round 10 versus Erick Rosa to become WBA World Light Flyweight Champion. And that was, it was a breakthrough performance for Takami. Takami started quickly, landing the cleaner shots, and was able to take control pretty much from the get-go. He was able to fight at a mid-range and in close, and just inevitably be better at both, ranges, no matter where he was fighting. The shots from Rosa did seem to have a bit of an effect, but Takami was definitely landing cleaner throughout, and Takami was very accurate, had a very good output. He was moving well and finding the angle to the body very nicely as well. It was a very much a traditional shot in which you see with Japanese fighters, where they'll tap one to the head and then they'll step into a nice body shot, and it's a brutal shot to take. It can definitely wind you and slow you down, and I think them type of shots and just a continuous barrage of punches with just great accuracy was just way too much for Rosa. You could see that he was struggling, but he grew into the fight a little bit. He was, I think round 6 he had a good round, and but then at that point it was just too late. After he had a good round, Takami came out stronger, changed the gears, and made Rosa look weaker. There was a few shots in which definitely did seem to take an effect on Rosa. Credit to Rosa for not going down earlier, because, like I say, definitely took some punishment. Takami definitely was looking amazing in this fight. He made the fight the longest in his career. He went the longest distance and still looked, like I say, that he was just shifting through the gears whenever he wanted to, which was really nice. And you could see that Rosa gave his all, but it was just not enough. The ref did the right thing. Takami was too dominant and Rosa was exhausted, and just the way that he stumbled into the ropes after the first knockdown, again, like I say, you could just see that there wasn't anything left in him. And I think we have a real star in the light flyweight division, and perhaps in the flyweight division soon. It wouldn't surprise me if he moves up in Kyosuke Takami. I think he has all the capabilities. You could see in between the rounds he was encouraging the crowd and interacting with them, and the fans were getting behind him. And I don't think it will be difficult to be able to develop a fighter like Takami. I'm not saying putting him in with any of the world champions just yet. There's time to develop him, but I definitely think that there is a star there in the making in the light flyweight division, which definitely does need a new star now that somebody like a non-Chinga isn't really at the highest of levels anymore. So again, I think that has the capabilities to be a real star, and with something like a Teraji perhaps on the out a bit as well, Takami can really easily kind of slot in to take his place. And I think he's an excellent fighter with, like I say, bundles of ability, and he's definitely one to watch out for. So yeah, that is it for today's video. Hope you did enjoy. Like the video if you did, like the video, subscribe if you're new, and thanks for watching.